the incongruous frivolity of it against the plain fabric of her navy woolen skirt, the delicate poise of its marbled arched neck in her worn working hands, and I realised that this was what all of us women were craving, a bit of beauty, something pretty for us to look at and touch and wonder at, to break through the monotony of our hard lives. I'd come back from America with a trunkload of beautiful things, and that was all that separated me from my neighbours. I wanted to give each of them a piece of the beauty that I had hidden away in this trunk. I stuck my hand in and pulled out Isabel's black silk gown with the embroidered peonies. It was the first beautiful thing I had seen when I arrived in America, the garment that for me had most epitomised the glamour of wealth of New York. How I had coveted it. I handed it across to a plain, round-faced girl who had pushed herself to the front of the circle, and she yelped with delight as she grabbed it. Dervla, a woman who was probably her mother, said, "Give that back at once." Dervla's eyes widened as she closed her eyes and held the soft fabric to her cheek. I realised that that was the moment of beauty, the fleeting joy of acquisition, and then it was gone. I was glad to be giving these things away with the same ease that they had been given to me. And that's from the... have you had enough yet, or shall I chance one more reading? One more reading?
Go ahead.
Okay, I'll do one more. This is a reading, and I apologise because I know that some of the Irish American writers who are here tonight, Honor Malloy and the lads, have heard this before, so I apologise for that. And thank you for coming out again in support of me. This is a piece that I know Peter quite enjoyed, so I'm going to read it to him. And this is Ellie's journey is based on. You know, we didn't have, on my mother's side of the family, we had two Yanks, which was my grandmother's two aunts who came to America and did very, very well for themselves, and they were dressmakers. One of them was a seamstress for Betty Hutton, and I take that to, I don't know if it's actually on her gravestone, I suspect it is. And they came over to America and they had a great time, and they sent packages home. All of my grandmother's wardrobe and all of her sisters and everyone were dressed from clothes in America. They had a nice little farm. They weren't well-to-do now by any stretch, but they did all right. So they didn't emigrate. And in fact, what happened was these two sisters retired and came back to the west of Ireland and moved back to Kilkelly and opened a shop. And these two women were really the inspiration for this book, because I remember looking at them and thinking, why did you come back? I mean, even now, when I drive through Kilkelly, there is, even with the Celtic Tiger and everything, there is nothing in Kilkelly. It's an I apologise for saying from Kilkelly here, but it's an absolute kick. Oh, well, you're from nearby, and you're nearly family, so that's the closest I have to a relative. She was born in the same village as my grandmother, but it really is a kippy village. There's nothing in it. And these two incredibly glamorous women, and they were cross as well, you know, and they came back and they moved to this little village, and everyone was just like, oh, just thought they were millionaires. You know, everyone spoke about them as if they were millionaires.
What were their names?
Their names, I can't remember. They were May and Anne Morley. And they came back and they opened this little shop, and I just remember being completely fascinated by them, and why would they come back, and how difficult they must have found coming back to Ireland, you know. And so that was the journey that I wanted Ellie to make. I wanted her to go to America, become completely infatuated by the whole thing, have this wonderful experience, and then have to go home to Ireland. And really, that's where the guts of the book is in her coming to terms with her life back in Ireland. So this is a scene from that part of the book. Ellie is back in her cottage with her husband, and she's very discontent. And I'm just going to read you a few pages, and then that'll be it. Right, John has done everything that he can to make Ellie's house, to make their house more pleasant. Once the floor was complete, John seemed content that his duty in persuading me to stay in Ireland was done. I had asked for a wooden floor, he'd given me a wooden floor, as if that were the only obstacle to my complete satisfaction with life in Ireland. He carried on about his business as if there was never any question of my having sacrificed everything for him. After all, I felt he had reasoned, what other comfort could a woman possibly want in her house aside from a bit of wood under her feet? I placed the small embroidered rug I'd brought with me from Manhattan to my side of our bed, and each morning I slid my bare feet into a pair of Isabel's satin slippers and went about setting the fire and preparing the breakfast without needing to put on woolen stockings or boots to keep me warm. However, as soon as I caught myself aware of the comfort in my new floor, I would start thinking about all that was missing. Hot water from the tap, electricity, a future, my freedom. I distracted myself as best I could with my daily work and kept my anger bottled because there was no sense in indulging it. The situation was set as it was, and there was nothing I could do or say that would change things. But still, as the weeks passed, I was not only miserable at all I had lost, but inwardly raging with John for making me stay and seeming so blasé about it. In truth, although I could see that my husband was trying his very best to appease me, he could not do anything right. As the weather grew warmer, John hoped that my humour would warm alongside it. I'll finish early today, and you and I can take a stroll down to the river, Ellie. I saw mayfly hatching down there yesterday. I'll surely catch us a trout for the tea. It's too wet, I'd say. The fields are muddy, and I don't want to ruin my skirts. In truth, I didn't give a damn about my skirts. I just could not bear to be around John's relentless optimism and childish awe of nature. There's a great draw in the days, Ellie. Spring is here. Look, the moon is full to bursting, Ellie. Can you hear that beautiful singing? It's a skylark, Ellie. Everything's grand. Isn't this better than New York, Ellie? Although he never said it out loud, it was implied in the way he tried to cajole compliments out of me. As if a jam jar of bluebells and buttercups was a match for a career, wealth, refinement, a future full of excitement and opportunity, the litany of conveniences that I had left behind. One of our cows was pregnant, and when John came in for his breakfast that morning, he looked worried. Her bag is flagging. She could go today, he said. I don't like the look of her, though. I'm going to get poured. Sorry. She was an old cow, and John was nervous about the birth, but I had no interest. I heard the cow braying in the shed and craved the distraction of a radio to drown out her distressed hee-haw. I missed the radio more than anything else. The frivolity of everyday music was gone to me completely now, another acute source of resentment. John and Paul came back an hour later and went straight into the shed. She's coming, Paul said as he rushed in onto my spotless floor in his dirty boots. Have you some soap and water and I'll wash my hands. I brought out a basin and soap and left it on a stool in the front porch for both men to wash by, then left them to it, loudly singing my favourite Fanny Bryce song. It cost me a lot, but there's one thing I've got, it's my man. Cold and wet, tired you bet, but all that's soon forgot with my man. Drowning out the cries from the shed. I just put the buttermilk to the flour to make bread when John stuck his head in the door. He was wild-eyed and panting, "We need you, Ellie." As I was shaking my head and pointing at the unmade bread, he said, "Now, Ellie, we need another body. There's no time. The calf is breech." I had no choice but to follow him. If a cow ran into problems birthing, it was all hands on deck. That much I knew. I had, after all, been around the Hogan farm through most of my youth, although I had never been present at an actual birth before. I wiped my hands on my long apron, grateful that I was at least wearing it for protection. As I followed John into the shed, I almost fell on my back, my feet skidding across the inch-deep puddle on the floor. The air was thick, with the salty, mossy smell of this large farm animal, and her agitation mingled with the men's obvious fear. She was penned in at each side, and Paul was at her head, holding her to the wall.